Hi guys, welcome to the episode. As if you follow my Facebook page, then a lot of you will know that I've recently been quite unwell. I won't go into details, but I was admitted to hospital for a couple of days, but I think I'm all on the mend now. But seeing as I can't get out and about and do any live on location vlogging, I thought I'd run through how I edit my seascape images. So I've opened up this particular image here, taken at Burnbeck Pier. I've opened it up into Camera Raw, and it was shot at, as you can see up here, f16. It was 10 seconds, ISO 64 on a Tamron 24-70 2.8 G2 lens. Obviously it was on a tripod, etc, etc. So this is a single shot. It's not a merge or anything like that, so the exposure is pretty good anyway. It was shot on a D810, so it's got good dynamic range. So you can see these blue bits here, if you're not aware. This is showing you burnt out or shadows, so it's jet blacks, so sort of loss of detail if you like, and the red is burnt out highlights. So I open the image into Camera Raw, as you can see, and then one of the first things that I do, if I don't feel the image is warm enough, I don't necessarily go straight to the white balance slider, as you can see here, but I go into split toning, and I'll move up into the sort of browny oranges, the sort of deeper oranges, around about there somewhere. And then I'll drag the saturation up, obviously whilst looking at the image. Excuse that flicking, it's a conflict with my graphic card, it happens every now and then. So I'll drag that up, which will warm up just the highlights, because it's a split tone, so I'm working on just the highlights here. So I'll pull that up probably to about there, I'd say. And as you can see, as I'm dragging that up, the highlights are being more blown out. But I'm not worried about that, because I'll show you how to deal with that in a second. So that's the first thing I do. So once I've done that, I'll go back to my main editing bar, and then I'll go up to graduated filter. I'll click on this, and then what you need to do when you first open this is just click on the minus there, and it will reset everything, because it remembers your last settings. So if you just click on minus on the exposure, it will reset everything back to just -50 with nothing else. So I'll start with that, and then I'll literally just drag from top to bottom like so, and pull this down a bit, because I want to just bring back a bit more detail. I don't have to go too crazy, because it's only a sunset anyway, so that, you don't want to see the detail in the sun itself, because obviously there's it's just you just don't need to. So I pull that down, so that's the exposure is now -50 from here down with a graduation blend there. But what I don't want to do, I don't want to darken the pier any more than it already is. So the way to avoid that, and if you leave it as it is, what you end up getting if you raise the shadows later is you'll end up with haloing around the shadow and the highlight area, so that the pier will have quite an obvious halo line around it, and it looks horrible. And it's the first thing I see on edited pictures now when I look at some other people's work that don't use this method. I see this halo, and it drives me nuts. So it's something that I found a way of getting over that by, it was somebody else's video actually that I watched. But so you put your mask in, and then go down to the range mask down here, and if you click on luminance, I'll just pull this down a bit so you can see, there's a slider here which gives you your luminance range. So what this is at the moment the graduated filter is affecting everything from the deepest shadows to the brightest highlights, but I don't want it to affect the shadow areas of the pier. So all you have to do is drag this end over this way, so it's more into the highlight ends. As I move it, you can see the red getting bigger and smaller, so you can kind of see where you're at tone wise. So somewhere around there, and then you can either pull down on the exposure, and this will only affect the selected luminance range, so it'll only affect the highlights of the image. But you have to be careful not to pull it down too much, because if I go down, I mean, it just looks silly all up in the corners and around the top end. It just looks terrible. So I only want to pull that down a touch, but what I'll then do is pull a bit of the highlights and a bit of the whites as well. You can see some of the details sort of coming back. I'm just going to disable the highlight, the highlight clipping up here, so we can see what we've got. And you know, that's fine, to be honest. I'm not too worried about that, and I'm not too worried about this area on the sea either, because this, you know, there's no real detail being lost there because it's only a reflection. So we'll leave that as that is, I think. So that's fine. So I'm happy with that. So I'll click back on the hand up here. What I can then do is just boost some of these shadows. I can either do that with the graduated filter, I can reverse it and go upwards and then boost the shadows, or we can just boost the shadows on the overall image, but which I'm probably going to do with this one, to be honest, because the whole image could do with a bit of a boost on the shadows. Because what I want to try and do is bring back some of these highlight, this sort of golden colour area where the sun's hit the rocks. I want to bring some of that back out, so we'll see how far we can push it like this without causing any issues. Which, that's not bad, to be fair. So that's, yeah, I'll probably leave that around there, because again, not too worried about, you know, on the rear of the rocks here, because obviously the sun's coming from the front. On the back you're going to have darker shadow areas, so I don't want to boost that too much, because it would look unnatural and you'll end up with a HDR looking image, which is not something that I want. So boosted the shadow, so I'll go on to contrast now, and we'll give that a bit of a kick. Again, not too much. By boosting the contrast, it helps with your colour. It kind of deepens your colours as well, so that's good. I mean, keep an eye on your highlight clipping as you're making these adjustments, because it will change, but you know, it's nothing. So yeah, so as I was saying, keep an eye on the highlight clipping as you're making the adjustments. So where do I want to go from here? I think I'm going to give the temperature a little bit of a kick. So yeah, give the temperature a bit of a boost. I don't want to go too far, because I like a little bit of you know, a slight sort of purpley hue. So I'm going to kick that up a little as well. Yeah, not too. I don't want to go too mad with it. Sorry about the blockiness that keeps coming up. I do need to address that. Might just drop that down a little bit more, actually. Okay, that's looking pretty nice now. Yeah, it's looking quite good. Another trick within Camera Raw: if you hold down the Alt key, I don't know what that would be on a Mac, but on a PC, if you hold down Alt when you're adjusting your highlights and your whites and you know, your sort of general exposure and tones, if you hold down the Alt key and move the slider, it gives you a real-time mask of what's happening, so you can see which bits are blowing out and you know, which bits aren't. So I mean, here I can afford to boost the whites of the overall image a little bit, and you know, I can get away with a little bit of clipping around the sun. I'm not too fussed about that. So that's brightened that up quite nicely, actually. I might have gone a little bit too far. Okay, yeah, that's cool. I'm happy with that. Let's have a look at the highlights. I can pull those down a little. Yeah, that's looking nice. Shadows, we're happy with those. The blacks, I might pull the blacks down a little, just to add a little bit more depth to those rocks in those deepest shadowing areas. Just gives a bit more definition. That's good, I'm liking that. I'm going to give it a touch of clarity, if you can actually see it. Touch of clarity, not too much, because this is like a micro contrast. If you push that too far, it will go really contrasty and it'll look, yeah, just so horrible. Vibrance, this is mainly like a blue green kind of booster, but it does, you know, it picks up the yellows and things like that. So I'll give that. It's not like an overall saturation. It's a more specific. So I'm going to boost that a little bit. And let's just turn off this clip-in mask. And yeah, that's not looking too bad. I'm actually going to drag that down. Drag the temperature down a little bit because the sun was a little bit too orange. These kind of areas here are a little bit too much. Drag the vibrance down a touch. That's not too bad. You can see the blue areas here are the dark shadows, but I'm not too fussed about that. Like I said, I want to bring out the highlights on these rocks here, and I'll show you how to do that when we open it up into Photoshop. So I'm just going to go into lens corrections, remove chromatic aberration. I'm not really sure. Yeah, I will add the lens profile because you do get a bit of barrel distortion with the Tamron that I used. The vignetting though, I like a vignette to my image, so with the correction I tend to drag it down a little bit so there is still a little bit there, because I just like the look. You know, I don't like it when it's completely uniform from edge to edge, so I prefer to have a bit of darkness around the corners and stuff. It's just personal preference. You do whatever you want. Okay, so that's looking alright, I think. Yeah, that's fine. So I'm going to open image now, which will open it into Photoshop. There we are. So now we're in Photoshop, and yeah, you can see it's looking quite nice. It's a nice crisp image. Contrast is good. Of course, the sun's going to be blown out. I mean, there's nothing you can do about that. But you know, could have done with a bit more detail in the sky on this particular image. But it's just to show you really what I do. Okay, so once I'm in here, the first thing I'll go into is the Adjustments tab, and I'll go onto my levels. Just have a look at the contrast. Normally, just bring in, because I've normally set it within Camera Raw, so round about where I want it, so the histogram's not normally far off. But I usually just bring the shadows up just one, just to sort of, you know, give it that little bit more of a kick, a bit more punch. That's fine. So I'll flatten that one down. I usually then go into, I usually sharpen it by using a high pass sharpening filter. I'll leave this zoomed in and hopefully you can see the difference. And it's not the sharpest image to begin with, to be fair, but so I've got an action that I've saved for this, but I won't go into that now. But it's a high pass sharpening technique, which, I mean, if you Google it, you can find out how to do that. So let's just go running through its action now. You should be able to see a little bit of difference on the screen when it's finished. So it's just sharpen at the edges a bit. Like I said, it's not the best image to begin with, but it's definitely made a difference and improved it slightly. Now when you look into the distance here, you can see these pillars are off kilter. It's because I was shooting at 24mm, but I was pointing the camera slightly downwards, so your uprights become slightly off key. But what you can do there is go into filter and go into lens corrections, which is opened up on my other screen, so let me bring that back over here. Yeah, so open up into lens correction, and then you can either do automatic, or I prefer to go into custom, and then we need to alter our vertical perspective. If we zoom into about 50%, pull the image over to around about here, and then we'll do some live adjusting just to try and, we don't want to, I don't think we'll need to go sort of fully straight on those because it might affect the image in other ways, but just enough so that it's not quite so noticeable. And if we go back out to fit on screen, I mean, that definitely looks better. We've lost some of the image around here, which was fine because I was going to crop it anyway because there was a couple of rogue rocks around here, but it just makes the image look obviously straighter and you know, just a bit better overall. So that's fine. We'll let it OK. Now we're back in Photoshop. Alright, so need to boost these highlights down here. So what I'm just going to do, because I've just done lens correction, the image requires flattening first, so that's fine, right? Okay, so what I'll do now is I will press Control and J on my keyboard, which creates, down here you can see it's created a copy of the original layer. And then I'll go over to the Dodge and Burn tool here and select the Dodge tool, which boosts the highlights. Up here is your ranges, so you've got shadows, midtones, highlights. This is like a brightening brush. So I want to do that I'll do it on the highlights first. They're really important that you change the exposure here right down, so it'll be on about 50%, which is way too much. So you need to drop that down to about 3. You really don't need it any more than that. And then just select the size of the brush you want, whichever size that is. I mean, down here I can be fairly, slack around this whole kind of area. So yeah, select the brush size, and then just click the mouse and just start painting, sort of in the brighter areas, just to try and pull out some of that colour and some of that reflection from the sun. Let me go around here. This bit's come up quite nicely there, so that's good. There's a little bit here. Now what you need to remember is when you press and hold the mouse as you're painting, that's adding a 3% boost. Once you let go of the mouse button, if you press it again and go over it again, you're going over with another 3%, so you'll have effectively 6%. So you need to be sort of careful that you don't let go of the mouse and then go again, and because you'll end up with a sort of uneven boost in that area. So something like that, a little bit around here. Okay, and a little bit more on this rock. Okay, that's not bad. So if we go over to the layers panel over here, if I click on the eye, you see the subtle difference on the rock. So it's brought out a little bit, it's brightened it up, a bit more colour, and it yeah, just generally looks a bit better. I think it's a bit more sort of foreground interest there for you. I'm going to try on the mid-tones as well. Change the brush to the mid-tones and just boost those up a little bit. Just on these few rocks here. Okay, that's looking good. There you go, you see the difference. So that's fine. So Control and E will flatten that layer again, and then I'll Control J to create another copy. And then I'll go over and go to the Burn tool. Now this darkens the shadows, or this darkens rather than lightens as opposed to the other one. So I'm going to select shadows. Again, make sure that your exposure is only on 3%. And then select your brush size. And I'm just going to paint in over this rock, and it will pick out all the sort of little details in the cracks, all the shadow detail. And it just kind of increase the contrast a little bit around this area. Okay, that might have gone a little bit too much. It's not too bad. The good thing about when you create a layer is if you've gone a bit overboard, you can either just scrap that layer and start on another one, or you can go to the opacity and just drag down, up or down, so how strong you want the effect to be. So I only want it to be subtle, so down to about 62. That's fine, I'm happy with that now. Okay, so there's not an awful lot really that needs doing to this image that I can think of. So I'll go to the crop tool. This will probably, yeah, this is an A1 or an A2 or A3 crop that preset that I've got set there, which is probably about right. I like that, the 4:5 crop, and I also like the square crop, but square won't really work with this image, and 4:5 I think will be a little, yes, a little bit too tight, I think. Yeah, so I'm going to stick with an A1 crop on that. And just flip that round. Pull that. So I'm going to just move this over so that we lose that leg. And so go to about there. And pull this in a little bit and put the sun on the top upper third there. We've got the rocks down in the lower third. And then press enter, and that will crop that in. That's pretty good. I'm quite happy with that. So that's pretty much it. That's kind of the basic. I mean, I'll usually zoom in, have a look around, see if there's any dust spots or sensor spots or anything that need removing. Like I said, this isn't the sharpest image to begin with. The lens I was using, I was never really. Yeah, see, we've got a dust spot there, so I'll just use the spot removal tool. Just paint that in, and it'll just, like magic, disappear. Just like that. There's another one there. Yeah. Yeah, as I was saying, the lens wasn't great. I've actually got rid of that lens now because I wasn't happy with the results that it was giving me. I mean, the D810 is capable of much better than what that lens can produce. So, yeah, that's pretty much it, really. I think I wouldn't really do much more to that. I mean, there was more you could do to it if you wanted to, but I don't really think it's necessary. I mean, what I was trying to sort of show you was how you can recover the highlights and, you know, sort of bring out little bits of detail, and yeah, things like that. So what I then do is go up to image, because I always edit in 16-bit. When I'm in Camera Raw, I export from RAW in 16-bit. It's just what I do. You don't have to do that. So I go to mode, go down to 8-bit, and then file, save as, and then I'd name it whatever that might be. So I'm just going to put this one as a tutorial image. Then I will hit save, and then it gives you save options here. So I'm saving it as a JPEG, obviously highest quality possible, and then just hit OK. Job done. That's it. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed this. Like I said, I'm on the mend, so hopefully I'll be out and about soon and get some more you know, on-scene footage and a bit of vlogging going on, etc, etc, and obviously some new images as well. But just thought I'd throw this out in the meantime, just to, you know, hopefully help some of you guys out there if you're not sure on your editing, or if you just wanted to know how I do it. This is how I do it. Everybody's got their ways, but this is just mine. It's just what I've always done. It's easy, and yeah. So I hope you liked the video. If you did, it'd be great if you give us a thumbs up. Even better if you could leave us a comment. It's all good. And if you haven't subscribed, please do that too. And if you click on the little bell next to the subscribe thing, you'll get notifications every time I upload a new video. Alright guys, thanks for watching. Cheers.